When a racist cop crosses the line and assaults a black teen girl, he has no idea her father is the new chief of police and his worst nightmare. A quiet suburban neighborhood. A black teenage girl, Jasmine, 16, is walking home from school, headphones in, backpack slung over one shoulder. A police cruiser pulls up beside her. Officer Bradley, mid-40s, aggressive demeanor, steps out, his hand resting on his holstered gun. Officer Bradley, barking, "Hey you, stop right there." Jasmine pauses, confused. "Me? What's wrong, officer?" Officer Bradley, sneering, "Don't play dumb. You fit the description of a suspect we're looking for." Jasmine, nervously, "Suspect? For what? I was just walking home from school." Officer Bradley, cutting her off, "Hands where I can see them. Now." Jasmine, visibly shaken, raises her hands. Her father, Mr. Carter, early 40s, calm but authoritative, pulls up in his car, witnessing the scene. He steps out, his face a mix of concern and anger. Mr. Carter, firmly, "Officer, what's going on here? That's my daughter." Officer Bradley, dismissive, "Stay back, sir. This doesn't concern you." Mr. Carter, stepping closer, "It does concern me. She's a minor, and you're harassing her without cause." Officer Bradley, visibly irritated, shoves Mr. Carter back. Jasmine instinctively steps forward to defend her father. In a flash, Officer Bradley grabs Jasmine by the arm and, without warning, punches her in the face. She falls to the ground, clutching her cheek. The neighborhood falls silent. Mr. Carter, furious, helps Jasmine to her feet. He pulls out his phone and begins recording. Mr. Carter, angrily, "You just assaulted my daughter. Do you realize who you're dealing with?" Officer Bradley, smirking, "I don't care who you are. I'm the law around here." Suddenly, another police cruiser arrives. Out steps Captain Reynolds, 50s, no-nonsense demeanor, who immediately assesses the situation. "Captain Reynolds?" Sternly. "Bradley, what the hell's going on here?" Officer Bradley, defensive. "This girl was resisting arrest, and her father was interfering." Mr. Carter, calmly handing over his ID. "Actually, Captain, I'm Marcus Carter. I'm the new chief of police starting next week." Officer Bradley's face pales. Captain Reynolds looks stunned, then furious. "Captain Reynolds," to Bradley, "you've got to be kidding me. You just assaulted the incoming chief's daughter?" Officer Bradley, stammering, I didn't know. She was, Mr. Carter," cutting him off. "Save it. Your badge and gun." Now, Officer Bradley hesitates, but under the glare of Captain Reynolds, he reluctantly hands over his badge and gun. Jasmine, still shaken, stands by her father's side, her cheek bruised but her head held high. In the police station, where the tension is palpable, now stripped of his earlier bravado, Officer Bradley sits in an interrogation room. His cocky demeanor has been replaced with visible fear and anxiety. The room is dimly lit, emphasizing the gravity of the situation. The door opens and Mr. walks in. Carter, now dressed in his official chief of police uniform, flanked by Captain Reynolds. The atmosphere is heavy with unspoken tension. "Mr. Carter," calmly, but with an edge of authority, "you've been on the force for 15 years, Bradley, and in that time, you've racked up more complaints than any other officer in this precinct." He places a thick folder on the table filled with documents detailing Bradley's history of misconduct, excessive force, racial profiling, and multiple unresolved complaints from citizens. Captain Reynolds stands silently, his arms crossed, his expression stern. Officer Bradley, pleading, his voice shaky, "Chief, I made a mistake. I was just doing my job." Bradley's tone is desperate, his eyes darting between Mr. Carter and Captain Reynolds, searching for any sign of leniency. But there is none. Mr. Carter, firmly leaning slightly forward, Your job is to protect and serve, not to harass and assault innocent people. What you did to my daughter, what you've done to countless others, is a disgrace to this badge." His voice is steady, but filled with quiet rage. He doesn't raise his voice, but every word carries weight. Captain Reynolds steps forward, placing another stack of files on the table, this time containing internal investigations and witness statements against Bradley. Captain Reynolds, coldly, "You've been skating by for years, Bradley, but this time you went too far." Bradley's face falls as he realizes the extent of the evidence against him. He slumps in his chair, his hands trembling. The reality of his situation sinks in. His career, his reputation, and his freedom are all on the line. Mr. Carter, leaning in, his voice low but firm, "You're done, not just in this precinct, but in law enforcement altogether. I'll make sure of it." The finality in his tone leaves no room for argument. Bradley looks down at the table, defeated. The camera pans to his hands, which are now clutching the edge of the table, his knuckles white. Outside the interrogation room, Jasmine watches through the one-way mirror. Her cheek is still slightly bruised, but her expression is one of quiet strength. She stands tall, her arms crossed, as she observes the man who assaulted her facing the consequences of his actions. Her father joins her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Jasmine, softly, looking at her father. Dad, are you okay? Her voice is gentle, but there's a hint of concern. Despite everything she's been through, she's more worried about her father's emotional state than her own. Mr. Carter, smiling faintly, his voice warm. I'm fine, sweetheart. But more importantly, are you? He looks at her with a mix of pride and relief, grateful that she's standing strong despite the trauma she endured. Jasmine, nodding, her voice steady. I'm just glad you were there. Her words are simple, but they carry a deep meaning. She knows her father's presence made all the difference, not just for her, but for the countless others who have suffered at the hands of officers like Bradley, for a moment capturing the bond between father and daughter. Then it pans back to the interrogation room, where Bradley sits alone, his head in his hands. The sound of his muffled sobs fills the room as the weight of his actions crashes down on him. Mr. Carter and Jasmine walking away from the interrogation room, their heads held high. The camera follows them as they step into the brightly lit hallway of the police station, symbolizing a new chapter, one of accountability, justice, and hope for a better future. The final part opens with a sense of renewal and hope. The setting is a community gathering in the town square, where a large crowd has assembled. The atmosphere is charged with anticipation as Mr. Carter, now officially sworn in as the new chief of police, stands at a podium. He is dressed in his full uniform, the badge on his chest gleaming under the sunlight. Beside him stands Jasmine, her head held high, her bruise from the incident now fading but still visible, a symbol of her resilience. The crowd is a mix of community members, local leaders, and police officers, all eager to hear what the new chief has to say. Mr. Carter, addressing the crowd with a calm yet authoritative voice. What happened to my daughter last week was a wake-up call. It exposed a deep-rooted problem in our system, one that I am committed to fixing. His words are met with murmurs of agreement and nods from the crowd. He pauses, letting the weight of his statement sink in before continuing. Mr. Carter, from this day forward, this department will prioritize accountability, transparency, and justice for all. No longer will we tolerate misconduct or abuse of power. Every officer will be held to the highest standard, and every citizen will be treated with the respect and dignity they deserve. The crowd erupts into applause, their cheers echoing through the square. The camera pans across the faces of the audience, capturing their relief and hope for a brighter future. Among the crowd, Captain Reynolds stands, his expression one of quiet approval, signaling his support for the new direction of the department. As the applause dies down, Jasmine steps up to the microphone. The crowd falls silent, eager to hear from the young woman who's become a symbol of courage and strength. She takes a deep breath, her voice steady and confident as she begins to speak. Jasmine, to the crowd, what happened to me could have happened to anyone, but it doesn't have to be this way. Together, we can create a community where everyone feels safe and respected, regardless of who they are or where they come from. Her words resonate deeply with the audience, many of whom have experienced or witnessed similar injustices. The camera captures the emotions on their faces, some nodding in agreement, others wiping away tears. Jasmine's speech is a powerful reminder that change begins with courage and unity. As she finishes speaking, the crowd erupts into another round of applause, louder and more heartfelt this time. Mr. Carter steps forward, placing a hand on his daughter's shoulder. They share a moment of quiet pride, their bond stronger than ever. The camera zooms in on their faces, capturing the love and determination in their expressions. The town square filled with people cheering and applauding. The sun shines brightly overhead, symbolizing a new dawn for the community. Mr. Carter and Jasmine stand together at the podium, their figures framed by the vibrant energy of the crowd. The screen fades to black as the sound of applause continues, leaving the audience with a sense of hope and the promise of a better future.